Well, hello everybody. Here we are. Every Sunday we have a live program based on the post that Harry finds on the internet that stimulate the conversation that we have here at Autistic Radio about what autism means for us as autistic people. Very much the point of what we do here at Autistic Radio is putting out content created by ourselves, because the world is made of people who want to represent us for their own reasons and their own purposes, often with the best heart. But something we need as autistic people is the medium where we can speak in long form in our own voices and get those things across in an autistic way, authentically to us, and share them with other autistic people. So there we have it. Every Sunday we will be here and we can provide some stimulus to join together and consider our own autism. Hi Harry, what have you produced for us today to consider the 555?
Thanks, Jules. Good evening, everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 22nd of June 2025, and this is where we discuss the Facebook post shared on the Autistic Radio Facebook page. And the first post is from Panda, which stands for Promoting Autism Neurodiversity Awareness, which is a charity organisation. And what they've shared is the following. Just read an incredibly honest and relatable piece about the worst job an autistic person ever had, and it hit home on so many levels. The author describes how, after his autism diagnosis, they finally understood why certain work environments had been so overwhelming and damaging for their mental health. They talk about being efficient and proactive in a previous job, only to have their initiative punished, more work piled on, instead of any recognition or support. Then, after a layoff, they landed a job as a fleet manager in a chaotic, open-plan trucking office. Constant noise, harsh lighting, ringing phones, people yelling, and relentless demands to instantly recall details about dozens of drivers. The sensory overload and social pressure were intense, and the toxic culture made everything worse. Within weeks, anxiety and depression took over their life, leading to panic attacks that lingered long after they had left the job. Looking back, the author realised it wasn't just a bad fit or personal failing. It was their body and mind reacting to an environment that was fundamentally hostile to autistic needs. Too much sensory input, no boundaries, and zero understanding from management or colleagues. The experience left lasting scars, and it's a story so many of us in the autistic community know all too well. Workplaces need to do better. Autistic people aren't difficult employees. We are often efficient, creative, and dedicated, but we need environments that respect our differences. That means less chaos, more structure, and actual listening when we say something isn't working. If you ever felt broken by a job that just wasn't built for your brain, you're not alone. And if you're an employer, please remember accommodating neurodivergence isn't just the right thing to do. It's how you unlock our strengths. There's a link to the actual article which I'll read shortly, but I'll look for people's thoughts first.
I had a warehouse job for a number of years, and I kind of loved it, but the social side was horrible. You know, it was like radio playing all day long, and a lot of young people there. You know, overexcitable, laughing and stuff. You know, I just used to put headphones on and just drill away. It was a nightmare after a while. Other things like I think they were talking in this article about routine, you know, and structure. When I've met that at work, it's the worst, you know, because you just sort of die in these places, you know, in that routine. You can know what you're doing, yeah, and take some pride in that, but after a while, you know, eventually I just turn jobs into neurodivergent experiences if I can, you know, I'll get lost in the stairwell or something, you know. By that time, you know, I'm really trying to get kicked out, but the pressure of that is another matter.
So, comment from Robbie. Sadly, I relate to a lot to this post and shared their own experience on the page. Sorry to put you on the spot, Robbie. I didn't mean it to say it that way.
I'm happy with sharing this because I related to a hell of a lot of it, both before my autism diagnosis and afterwards. I've experienced a lot of toxic policies within safeguarding, which treat meltdowns as a choice, and so I can understand where this is all going. Is that they just don't provide any adjustments. You expect it just to fit in, just like it has always been.
Moving on to the article that the post shares. It's called The Worst Job I Had as an Autistic Person by Kim Seaver, with the title below saying, I knew I hated that job, but it was not until I got my autism diagnosis that I knew why. Since I was diagnosed with autism last month, I have been reviewing my life in this new paradigm. Things that did not make sense before are starting to make sense now. One thing I have reevaluated was the worst job I have ever had. One thing I have reevaluated was the worst job I have ever had. I was laid off a little over 15 years ago from a place I had worked for 9 years. I had been hired as a website developer, and during the time I worked there, I developed new skills and implemented new tools to reduce my production time. I was doing in just a few minutes what used to take me hours. This freed up a lot of time. My bosses, I had two while I worked there, did not like that I had more free time. Even though I was producing the same amount of output, if not more, they thought that any productivity gains I made of my own initiative should be for their benefit and not mine. So, as I freed up time, they took stuff off their own plates and put them onto mine. Before long, my positions was less website development and more general tech support, and I hated it. When budget cuts came, our department cut half of its workforce, and I was one of the casualties. Luckily, because it was a unionised job, I ended up with a severance package that was equivalent of about 7 months' worth of income, which came in handy while I was unemployed. Job searching was tough though. I was getting no responses for months. I was even phoning companies to see if they had any unadvertised openings, and I hate cold calling. I finally found one company that was pretty impressed with my work experience and skill set. They wanted me to start in one department to get a feel for how I operated, then move on to a different department and repeat the process until I was pretty familiar with the entire operation. Then they would move me into a communications position. The downside was that I was paid less than the job that I got laid off from. Way less. My income, in fact, was cut in half. But no one else was willing to give me a shot. So what choice did I have? My new employer was a trucking company here in Lethbridge. And I was hired as a fleet manager, working Wednesdays through Sundays. I was responsible for a fleet of over 50 truckers. I had worked in logistics before, as a courier and as a same-day dispatcher, but my fleets were never more than a dozen. So while it was familiar, it was still a lot more I had done up to this point. I was responsible for knowing where all my truckers were at all times. They drove across Canada, from Vancouver to Montreal, and even into the United States, to California, Iowa, Texas, and Utah primarily. I had to not only know where they were, but how many hours left they could drive that day and how many hours left they could drive that week. Plus, because a lot of them had refrigerated freight, I also had to keep my eye on the temperature of the reefers. I was constantly tested on my knowledge by the dispatch manager. He would randomly call out, "Where is driver such and such number?" And I was expected to know which driver had that number and where their truck was. And it was not just the dispatch manager who did it either. All the dispatchers did it too. You see, as a fleet manager, I managed my fleet. I did not dispatch calls to them. That was responsibility of the dispatch team. If they yelled out, "Can driver such and such number take a load from Calgary to Winnipeg?" I had to know which driver that was, where they were, how long until they were empty, and how many hours they had left before needing to reset. And when I say call out and yell out, I meant it. The work environment was a very open space concept. Other than a handful of private offices around the perimeter from upper management, which mostly all related since it was family owned, everyone was split into two workspaces. Downstairs was where most of the paperwork was done. Upstairs, where I was, hosted the rest of us, pretty much customer services, dispatch, and fleet management. It was very chaotic. There were probably 30 to 40 of us all working at the same time, other than on Saturdays and Sundays when most of clients were closed. There were many phones ringing, so many people yelling. We were working under harsh fluorescent lighting, and our cubicles were short, maybe coming up to my belly button when I am standing. They offered very little insulation from the noise behind, beside, and in front of us. Our screens were CRT monitors using DOS-based software that was constantly being bombarded with flashing messages from drivers, customer service reps, dispatchers, other fleet managers, and my direct supervisor, causing us to constantly flip between screens using a variety of keyboard shortcuts we had to memorize. And we had to be sure we were checking our email too, which was in a different app. There was also a bunch of paperwork I would have to fill out, especially for truckers who had loads and would need to be inspected by the FDA when crossing into the United States. What do people think so far?
I don't really get it. It's quite a long story.
Sorry, I typed a comment in. I could write a book on this. I could go on for hours, so I should pull back.
It's not too long to go. What I'll do is I'll finish the story off, and then we can have more discussion on it. On top of that, there was also much profanity and backstabbing. Dispatchers and fleet managers were always so quick to throw their truckers behind. Dispatchers and fleet managers were always so quick to throw their truckers under the bus instead of taking responsibility themselves for when something went wrong. It pressured the truckers to take on calls that would take more time than they legally had left in their schedule. I honestly felt like truckers were being treated like livestock. It felt very unfair. It was all very overwhelming. So much auditory and visual stimulation. Not only did my brain have to remember all the driver information, but I had to process all that sound and sight. After working there for only a month, I ended up developing anxiety. It started out with uneasiness in my belly when I would take the bus to work on a Wednesday morning after my weekend. After a while, it would begin Tuesday evening when I realised I would have to go to work the next day. Before I knew it, I would be anxious my entire weekend, process what had just happened the week before, and regretting what would happen when I went back to work after my weekend. Eventually, the anxiety was ever present. When I was at work, when I was at home in the evening, and when it was my weekend. That uneasiness in my belly became more intense, and my chest started to feel like it was constricting. After a few weeks, this anxiety led to crippling depression, which took away all motivation to do anything outside of work. Unless I had a previously scheduled commitment to attend, I would spend all my at-home time lying in bed. For the longest time, I thought this anxiety and depression was just a result of me not liking the job. Looking back, however, I see it now as my body physically responding to all that overstimulation. I knew I could not stay there, but every time I tried to get another job, it would not work. I had a handful of job interviews, but I'd never get a job offer. Honestly, this has been the story of my life. I have always struggled finding a job. I rarely get a job interview when I apply, and if I do, I almost never get a job offer. This time is no different. Eventually, I decided to go back to school and finish my bachelor's degree, and it was the only way I could get away from that place. It was so bad there that the two people who hired me quit before I did, and they were both in upper management. Even after I left that place, I would still get panic attacks when I would drive by the building or even took the same route as the bus as I used to ride to work. This went on for weeks, if not months. I knew I hated that job, but it was not until I got my autism diagnosis that I knew why. What's your thoughts?
Thing is, you walk away from a job you really like, and then when you go to the next job, because I had this after I left a company I'd been with for 9 years when I was bullied out, and I just couldn't do it. I had job after job after job, and I would just fall flat, or I would have to leave because of the stress of it all. And after a while, it just becomes impossible to move forwards.
My experience is they want you to work, but they won't provide adjustments and support to do it. I've tried working myself, and they just I give them permission to work with my therapist. They want work with him. They just dismiss me.
The reason that I shared this and why it was so lengthy is I thought it was important to share both what Panda was saying and the actual story of someone's experience as well. On a personal level, this is what makes me fear actually getting employment because of stories such as these. Because I've heard of stories such as these, and it doesn't just relate to people with autism, but thinking about having autism and being in an environment where it's intense, and even without it being intense in terms of, the bad news stories about what the author Kim has provided, it's like you're going somewhere busy where you're working with other people, and it's just trying to take it all in while trying to concentrate on what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, not the only, but the most recent example I have of that, well, not in employment, it was voluntary, was being in the back room of an Oxfam shop, and there wasn't a lot of room. It was basically, the back of the shop was basically where a lot of place, well, all the stuff was stored, if not out in the shop, and the computer was right at the back. So there was always things going on. People want to take stuff off that shelf. People come to the back door to donate or to do other things. So there's always so much going on, and I never got used to that. And that was an environment where it was quite friendly and inclusive as well as it could be. But thinking about environments such as what has been described in that article, it's just so frightening to think, what sort of experience I could have had if I end up being in that position. Like, for instance, not being diagnosed as early as I was, or whatever other circumstance. It's just a shame to think that so many people, especially people that are good at their job, end up suffering because of the culture kind of swallows you up, and it tries to force you to work one way. And even if you're thinking beyond autism, I think that's a big ask for any company to do to any employee in any environment.
In my experience, the attitudes have not changed. My issues were outside of the work environment. They were to do with transport. And they weren't willing to work with my therapist to solve the issues. They were easily solvable, but they weren't willing.
I found if I have a job where I might be training for a very short period of time, and then when I'm actually doing the job, I'm being left alone to get on with it, I found that fine. This is all pre-diagnosis. The only thing when I was working in an office that I would insist on having the light tubes taken out above my desk because I just couldn't stand the light. But when they say working as part of a team, I mean, I just don't know about that.
The next post is from Aurora Consulting. Aurora is a autistic-owned business offering organisation, bespoke training and consulting based in Scotland, the UK. And they shared the following. This week has beyond busy. This week has been beyond busy. Training with West College Scotland on Monday, networking with Federation of Small Businesses on Tuesday, Autistic Pride Aberdeen online on Wednesday, making exciting future plans on Thursday. So much writing, I can't wait to share with you all on Friday. Autistic Pride in person and being on the national STV news on Saturday. I might get some downtime today. If not, I am definitely taking some tomorrow. It's been a fantastic week. I love engaging with so many people and all the community and autistic culture, all kinds of wonderful. Can't stop smiling. What's glimmering for you this week? And the picture I've shared is a busy wee bee visiting my garden this week. I'm off to take more bee pics. What's your thoughts?
Over to you, GR, with the glimmering.
No, we've done enough music stuff. We don't need more. It's nice to be busy, but it's nice to have a bit of downtime.
I thought you were making lots of jokes when you started to say it was beyond busy, and then there was something you said they were a bespoke company, but I think that I was just imagining it.
That's called the neurodivergent take.
I just wish this post was first. Well, it could have been first. It might add some, but it's just the way that the post just come about. If it was other way about, it'd be a good thing to start on. I mean, I like posts like these. It's like someone talking about a busy time, but a positive time. And I've had that myself. It's like I've had a right good busy time. It's been good, but I need a rest. But while you're resting, you're not having negative thoughts of, as you would have in a bad way, but you're just sitting sort of appreciating the moment that you're feeling good and productive and positive and looking forward to, get back on track following, the period of rest. And it's just to show a lot of good things happening out there. And it's not all doom and gloom as sometimes some posts can present. There's challenges out there, but being involved in so many positive things and doing things. Like I was talking about myself earlier on, I went to an awards ceremony Friday, which was very productive, and it was a busy week as well. And I enjoyed some downtime yesterday and a wee bit today as well before starting tonight, which I knew would be good. So I just like this sort of kind of positive kind of. It always gives me, pardon the pun, a buzz.
Good one, Harry. Robbie's made an excellent point in the comments there about he likes being busy because it's less time to think.
That's very true. It's less time to think about other things. It's like you've got to focus on what you're doing. And I generally do things. It's like looking to improve something, even just a wee challenge. It's like if I do this, it's like it's a bit of progress forward, and it can occupy your mind in a way where if you have too much time in your hands, your mind, or my mind, I should say, kind of starts to spiral. Because for some reason, I'm somebody that likes to regret something that I done 20 years ago. Even if I don't mean like anything bad or severe, it's just like a mistake I made. Like I said something wrong in a conversation, or a mistake was made, so it caused a bit of an issue which was later resolved. But it's like, why did I make that mistake in the first place. It's just like, I've got some free time here. I think I'll just start thinking of all the mistakes I made in my life. It's quite strange. It just depends on your mindset and how you're feeling as well. But I do have that creep in sometimes if I have too much free time. So it's good to be busy.
Do you remember the old days when every day had a task? Like Monday was washing day or something like that, and Tuesday was like baking day or something like that. You know, the life of a housewife. And then you think about work, and you think, like, well, the work of a housewife, or somebody who looks after a home, unpaid, say, but is doing all these fundamental tasks that need done. If they're not done, everything falls apart. So what's work, really? I'm curious as to where Aurora Consultant is doing the writing that they want to share with you all on Friday. And is there a link to this STV News appearance?
Yeah, it'll be on the page. They had shared about Autistic Pride that I shared last week, and obviously there'll be a lot of things happening, during that time. It's a busy time, so it'll all be available on there. The next post is from Mike's Neurodivergence Toolbox, which is a news and media website. I am a late diagnosed autistic with ADHD. I continue to struggle with a lifetime of unaddressed disabilities, but I hope that my efforts provide help and understanding to others with similar stories. Based in Charlotte, United States, North Carolina. And what is shared, the picture shared, the toolbox says, my main challenge is strike the most compassionate balance between acknowledging the grave difficulties we experience and offering encouragement, hope, and a way forward. It's easy to get lopsided. Too much hope without context is empty advice and wishful thinking. However, and I am as guilty as anyone, dwelling on difficulties without asking, well, what could make things better, may aid in the initial step of finding friends who have been through it too, but too often ends there without seeking a way forward. And of course, we need time to process in order to do so. Again, I don't suggest that I have the answers. I am simply generating conversation. What's people's thoughts?
This might tie in a wee bit, first reaction, it might tie in a wee bit with what Robbie was saying about, when you're busy, you've got less time to think. But, thinking will never stop. And so it's maybe making your thinking useful to a certain extent, learning how to handle it, maybe dwelling on difficulties without asking, well, what could make things better? So being quite practical with your thinking. Yeah, it's generated conversation and I've responded.
There are times where if I feel there is a problem or an issue, I'm always looking for some sort of solution, which is fair and done fair and quickly as possible. but there's mostly, as life can be, it's not as simple as just simply resolving them quickly, and it takes time. And I think a lot of autistic minds is all about problem solving. And sometimes I think some of us, I know in some conversations that I have with some friends, it's like we're trying to sort the world in many ways. It's like we're asking logical questions about the logic of how things are and why they are and how things can be done better. But if you do it more bite-sized, in bite-sized kind of chunks, it's like it makes things a bit easier. Rather than solving the world problems or the global problems of everything that you seem to be frustrated about in terms of autism or everything else, it's like sometimes just giving advice, giving someone a wee bit of reassurance, because that doesn't mean a lot to me. Because I recall, years ago going to some of the autistic social groups for the first time and feeling alone and feeling that the world's on my shoulders, the weight of the world on my shoulders. It's like, I feel alone here. I feel that there's no answer. But then you speak to one or two people that have sort of similar sort of issues, and they can give sort of advice or even tell you a story about their own experience. It's like it kind of creates a light bulb moment, and it's just a great way of moving forward. It's just don't try and look for all the answers, but just look for some bits of detail or information, and things can certainly help you moving forward.
See, when I think about responding to things like this, I often hit this point where it's like, sometimes it's just better to do nothing, say nothing, let it go to a certain extent. Because I'm reading the actual toolbox picture, strike the most compassionate balance between acknowledging the grave difficulties we experience and offering encouragement, hope. I mean, it's a big responsibility to offer hope. I mean, to whom? To yourself or to other people? I mean, I've got kids playing here, so I'll just go off.
Sometimes we've got to remember, or when someone puts information down, they may be quite early in their journey, or maybe just a discovery of something, just a realization of something. So something that may seem plainly obvious, so maybe that doesn't need to be, nothing needs to be said on that. Sometimes it's just good just to touch on it a little bit because of where we are in one's journey is maybe further on than others. But I do get your point though.
I do feel though that a culture's evolved where people do want to have a say. It's like everybody's got an opinion. It's the nature of the media.
Well, that's always been the case. It's just that there's never been a platform for many people to have that chance to have a say. Yes, there's a lot of things that are said that, that you don't want to hear, and some of it, is plainly prejudice, etc. But there was a time where it was just people kind of mouthing off in their house or down the pub. But now you're getting it in, in text, in words, on paper, or on a screen, I should say. And it's kind of, it's not all bad, but I do get your point. It's like people have always wanted to have a chance to say something, but they've got an opportunity to do it more now.
The social scenes I was in always kind of frowned upon serious subjects. That was like bringing everybody down to a certain extent. We were together socially to try and have some fun, as it were, create a kind of alternate situation, whether that was through drinking or whatever. But that burned itself out, yeah. You can't. remember there used to be the phrase like the bar staff would come over to our table collecting the glasses and say, "Are you putting the world to rights, boys?" You know, that kind of attitude. Or if you brought up weird stuff, it was pretty much frowned upon by your friends, you know, because I remember some folk I knew who you had to get like 3 or 4 drinks in them before they said anything.
Yeah, there's always that table in the pub, or maybe sitting at the bar, and you hear them talking away, and surprisingly, I'm not part of that. I think actually, when I go to the pub, I make sure I don't do that, because I seem to do that everywhere else. So it's a wee bit of a break from that, and you hear people kind of try to set the worlds to rights and some of their theories, but some of the things they say, are going, be quiet, we talking about. But aye, absolutely. That's one place that people have their saying about a lot of things.
I can recall the early days of the internet and people having this attitude. It was kind of like a pub where you could meet people but online, virtually. And it's, you know, what's eventually, from my experience, what's happened is kind of the culture's just got flooded by information. It's overwhelming. And you sometimes, you know, hanker or yearn for less information, you know, an experience of that at least. But point taken about people's journeys, Harry. Thanks for reminding me of that.
The next post is from Sendwise Hub, education page. Together we can make a difference, one conversation and one connection at a time. What they've shared is the following. I've written before about my middle son. He's 10, autistic, non-speaking, with global development. He's 10, autistic, non-speaking, with global developmental delay. He uses a variety of ways to communicate: gestures, facial expressions, body movements, vocalizations, augmentative alternative communication, song, sound, connections, presence. It's a full and beautiful system. His system. We were at the park again, because where else do we live? When a younger boy, maybe 7 or 8, approached him and started chatting. He asked questions, expecting a verbal response in return. O, of course, didn't respond in that way. He doesn't speak, but he does hum, vocalise, and sing constantly. That's his soundtrack. You could see the boy's face shift with confusion, and not knowing what to make of the lack of response, I stepped in, gently letting him know. He's not ignoring you, he just doesn't use mouth words. And without missing a beat, the boy smiled and said, "Ah, that's okay." That alone would have been enough normally, but this little dude was curious. Doesn't he talk because he doesn't know how or because he can't? This is the kind of question adults often fumble with, sidestep, or avoid altogether. I said he's autistic, so he communicates differently. The boy was visibly processing it. His whole face changed like a light had flicked on. Then, with the kind of effortless wonder adults often lose, he said, "So he doesn't talk, but he sings. That's really cool." And that was it. No fuss. Just back to playing. He kept chatting to O as though nothing had changed, because for him, nothing had. O didn't need to be different. The boy just needed new information, and once he had had it, the connection continued, and Once he had had it, the connection continued, and they were spinning each other in that dizzy piece of part equipment I can't even look at without feeling sick. The boy just needed language and context. He wasn't put off by the difference, he was curious about it. And once his curiosity was met with honesty, he embraced that difference like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not speaking? Okay. Singing instead? Cool, let's play. People say children are naturally accepting. That's true to a point. But what really makes acceptance stick is access to understanding. Children need to be equipped to meet differences and disabilities. This boy had a question. I gave him one simple, factual sentence, and he did the rest. What's your thoughts on this?
That's great. Shame that more people aren't like that. Maybe, but the thing is that boy now will go away and he's got a different understanding, and hopefully it will spread through and it'll help things for other people as well.
So, did I miss anything?
It's interesting.
Oh, I just said that it was a good thing. Sorry, it was a good thing that this NT boy understood, and hopefully he'll take that away and it will help spread understanding. So it's a positive thing.
I'm just trying to think why the rest of the world doesn't behave in the same way that the child does. The child is confronted with somebody who is very different to them, communicates in a different way, and appears from the story to be quite matter of fact about that difference. But an adult at the same point would have loaded all kinds of extra things on top of that. They would have taken with them all of their thoughts on what that child is or isn't or should or shouldn't be. And unlike the child that comes across difference, they've probably already got in their heads versions of how they should behave and be around that other person. Whereas what we learn from the child is ask a few questions and just get on with it and see how it works. It's quite beautiful to see the way a child deals with it in comparison to an adult.
My comments that are made is it is strained out of children, and we are taught we have to be compliant. So therefore, to be compliant, you're trained a certain way, which is supposedly the right way, and every other way is wrong. I do like this post. I just like the kind of, it seems so natural as well. It doesn't seem a manufactured good story, as some people may find. You know, you get these kind of patronising things that some people feel that it's done and it's sold in a way, you know, how, you know, and I'm maybe kind of going, you know, blabbing on a bit here, but what I'm basically trying to say, it's nice to see a story and it just seems something that's come naturally. Because I can remember being a child myself and being intrigued, and if someone was a bit different, like for instance, they spoke a different way, or they were different in some way that wasn't completely obvious, and it was explained why. And I always want to, you know, include a, you know, I was a child that always wanted to be friends with everybody. So that seems like a sort of thing that maybe I would have done if I was a child today or recent times. And it just seems so natural just thinking about it, and it's just nice how that comes into play with before the kind of adulthood thing is what the comments have already talked about, is you're basically trained to be an adult. You're trained to think a certain way, do things a certain way. A lot of times your natural personality overcomes that. But sometimes it's hard to override some things you've been taught because you're asking why that's been taught to you in the first place and why society is the way it is. And it's not till you get to a certain age or a certain time in life that you sort of kind of get how things are without going into great detail. So it's good that this sort of story does linger and last, and it does leave an impression. The next post is from Ballarat Autism Network, and they've shared a presentation about 5 things ADHDers are tired of explaining. Many people who've got ADHD are also autistic. Why can't you just focus? We can, sometimes too much. Hello, hyperfocus. It's not a switch we control. Focus with ADHD is interest-based, not willpower-based. But you had so much time to do it. Time doesn't feel linear to us. It's either now or not now. That's called time blindness, not laziness. Why do you always interrupt? We're not trying to be rude. We're just afraid we'll forget what we were going to say. Impulse control and working memory, daily battle. You're just making excuses. No, we're explaining how our brain works. ADHD is real, invisible, and exhausting to mask. But you did it yesterday. Yep, some days we can move mountains. Others, we can't answer an email. That's ADHD inconsistency, not a lack of effort. And this presentation was provided from Speak ADHD. What's your thoughts? If you identify with this?
In a sense, I do, Harry, but I've not been diagnosed as having ADHD. But I do pose these questions to myself. I'm almost like I perform ableism on myself to a certain extent. You know, it's just previous conditioning, the expectations of that normal life I was living up until I was diagnosed. So, one or two of these were quite poignant, I thought. Especially the discussion of time.
Yeah, I actually just got David Gray Hammond's book in the post today, and in it there's a bit here says research suggests that as many as 70% of autistic people also present clinically significant traits of ADHD. I wonder about like the overlap with symptoms of trauma as well there. But yes, I'm sure it will be relatable to quite a lot of people.
Yeah, I can identify with some of it. And although I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, I've got a feeling that, there's some parts of it, is relatable to my personality. Because the thing about diagnosis is like you've got to be searching for it. Like identity, you search for it as well, but it comes naturally, and it's something that maybe you accept and take on. But getting a diagnosis, you need to go through a doctor and all that, and the term that they put for people who are autistic and ADHD is AUDHD. I don't know if that's an actual term medically or a term that's been put upon by people that identify as such, just so it makes it a bit easier. So that you're not in two boxes, you're just putting one. Maybe not boxes, but you know what I mean. The labelling thing can get, it can scatter around and scatter brain because you can get all those so many things kind of put on your head. What the presentation does remind me of, though, is people do ask these sort of questions on that and other things. It's like, why are you that way? Why can't you keep it simple? Why are you being awkward? And that's why these sort of presentations with simple questions and answers need to be shared again, because so many people are put upon as like they're lazy or awkward, or even worse, just bad people. This person doesn't want to make an effort. It's all about them. They're selfish. And it's so unfair on so many people. So it's good that these things are shared and talked about and eventually by many people understood.
It's interesting to reflect on how this is all about fitting into a normal experience. These criticisms will occur when you're trying to fit into normality. But if you were, say, an eccentric or an artist or a creative, these might actually be seen as like, very positive, and people would admire you to a certain extent for it. So I think it's context, isn't it, that this operates in sometimes.
Yeah, in a comment, someone's saying that they're actually in a waiting list to be assessed for ADHD. And one of the things that's been thrown at them is they're not trying hard enough. Yeah, but I've heard that before in so many things. You're not trying hard enough. You're giving up too easy. You're using an excuse not to do something. And it's a weird thing thinking about that, because there was times that I struggled, but even I was questioning myself, what is the problem? Things like sounds, things like getting into a busy place and going, what is the problem? Why is that an issue? Everybody else is doing it. I think that's the thing as well, is if you're about with people and everybody else seems to be just getting on with it, obviously you don't know people's heads, but they're doing it and getting on with it and seemingly fine, and you're the one that seems to be the odd one out, and you're thinking, am I the problem? So things like that don't help people.
When you felt that, Harry, were you trying to fit in with what everybody else was doing? Was that what you wanted?
I did at the time, yeah. See, it's things like family occasions, birthdays, weddings, all sorts of occasions that ends up having a sort of after party afterwards. And there's loud music, and there's a lot of people kind of congregate in the one room. Even though the room is quite big, it's usually a church hall or a local golf club. It's like a big kind of room. There's a lot of people in it. There's a lot of noise. Heat. The lights as well. Discos like to do the sort of light thing. I might give myself away calling them discos. I don't know if they're called discos now, but basically you're trying to fit in. You're trying hard to mask. You're trying hard not to cause a scene. And what I used to do, although I don't do it so much now, I'm more comfortable with it now. But what I used to do is I used to leave those kind of things early. I'd be there like for halfway through or whatever. Not that there was a time that you had to stay until, but I usually generally left early because I could only take so much before I thought, right, I want to go back into my house where it's nice and quiet and there's no people. The next post is from Murawild. Speech therapist, illustrator and arts humanities website. I'm M, autistic and ADHD speech pathologist, illustrator, advocate and mum to 3 neurodivergent kiddos. And what they've shared is about a word they've made up called nope-rioception. Many of his experiences with proprioception, knowing where our bodies are in space. I made up this word, nope-rioception, because my life is nothing but mysterious bruises. Because my life is nothing but mysterious bruises, running into door frames, stomping, accidentally slamming doors, and smacking people in the face with my ever flailing hands. Nope-rioception is a thing. Does it happen to you? And the picture they've shared as well is a picture of what they're explaining. And they're saying having no idea where your body is in relation to other things, mid-judging where your arms or legs finish, mysterious bruises, spiritual stuff is hard, hands out when you walk to know how close you are to things, slamming doors and cupboards because how much force is even needed. You're walking heavily accidentally and dropping or knocking things. Do people identify with what's been shared?
I think we might all agree, but I'll pop in first and just say there was a time when that used to be called clumsy. I've noticed that because I need glasses a lot more, I'm not so spatially aware as I used to be, so I've got to consider that. But there is this thing about, doing a lot of things at the same time, getting a wee bit confused, like in a spin almost, and walking into things, stubbing toes, tripping over things. But I'm looking at what other factors may be bearing down on that too, before I go into accepting this idea that there's a thing called, is it proprioception? But yeah.
I think it's called dyspraxia because I know someone who's got it who has autism.
I've seen dyspraxia. It's a wee bit more than the accident-prone bruising, although it leads to that. It's very hard to know the difference between some of these terms or concepts.
Sometimes if you don't know something, you might think you've discovered something new, and you just lend a name to it until you realise it may be something linked to something else. But then again, we're all individuals, so things affect people in different ways, so giving it your own kind of special name isn't too, well, it isn't ridiculous, it maybe isn't too, out the way as it may sound at first. But I do identify with a lot of it myself. And I'm quite a big guy. I'm about 19, 20 stone as well. So, I can, sometimes, not bruises as such, but feeling hands maybe, bumping into things. I can sort of identify with some of it.
You can see this is coming from a young age. The image is a young person, a child even. So it's like that's a lot more intense than just maybe having a kind of clumsiness due to being maybe a bit hyperactive or hypervigilant. I mean, when I read about knowing where your arms or legs finish, I haven't quite got that, apart from the fact that I can't bend over to put my socks on anymore. And having no idea where your body is in relation to other things, hands out when you walk, to how close you are to things. These are all things I assume are like, bad eyesight, or there is a reason. It's not something I'm inherently, grown up with as a, part of me.
One of the things I struggled with was most things are right-handed and I'm left-handed. And I worked for a building company where everyone was left-handed. And some of the tools it was awkward for us. I mean, we got round it, but it was awkward.
Isn't that one of these workplace jokes where they would ask you if you wanted a right or left hand thing when, it could work both ways? Like, go and get me a tin of tartan paint or something. I do understand if it is, particularly excluding.
Yeah, I was a right-hand spanner.
The next post is from Neurodivergent Lou, who's a blogger finding a place in your typical world. And Lou generally shares presentations, and this is one of them. And it's called 8 Examples of Reasonable Adjustments You Can Ask For as an Autistic Person. Sensory adjustments, dimming of lights or wearing noise-cancelling headphones. Being able to communicate in line with preferences, for example, sending emails over phone calls. Having unwritten social rules explicitly explained. Having an appointment window rather than a specific time if the appointments are likely to overrun. Having a video walkthrough, maps of offices and workspaces. Using a pain scale to describe pain, from 0 to 10. Knowing about changes in advance where possible. Autism training provided to staff. What are people's thoughts?
Yeah, I think I responded to that one. I used to have the light tube taken out above my desk. This is all pre-diagnosis. And I also had this thing where if there was an answer phone in the office, which was you're supposed to put the phones through if you weren't at your desk. I put my phone through to the answer phone all the time, so I wouldn't have to answer the phone.
Yeah, I do that at home. With the house phone or the mobile phone, if I don't recognise the number, and if it's a house phone, I'm quite a wee bit away from the house phone, so I just let it ring, only because I know there's so many kind of scam calls out there. A lot of it automated, which is more infuriating than someone actually speaking to you. You know, you're getting up and then you're answering, and then you say hello, and then you feel you're saying hello to a machine talking back at you. It's strange. And I'm just grateful for voicemail. Because some of the things that I do, I provided my home phone number for. And it's good that someone can actually give a voicemail and then I phone them back, you know, depending on what the person's phoning for and if it's relevant. Because there's so much nonsense out there. And the things that's been sort of shared, you know, the sensory adjustments, the dimming of lights, as you've just mentioned, Gia. Yeah, I could totally get it, because all those lights are horrible. The wearing noise cancelling headphones, yes, I've talked about before. That's generally when I'm out travelling, but it does do the trick. You know, the preference of communication is generally emails or text. But I will make a phone call if needed. But generally the phone call is done if it needs to be more immediate or an explanation needs to be done. I mean, there has to be a time where a more human approach is done rather than just sort of kind of official in terms of giving information. But there are times where you're contacted in certain places and they do it deliberately to make it awkward. Is what speaking to someone isn't any good, because if you're sitting, like, for instance, you're in a queue waiting to speak to someone and being on the phone is not your thing, it's certainly not my thing. You're anxious, you're kind of trying to half script or even fully script what you're going to ask. You never know what the accent's going to be. You never know the sort of approach the voice is going to have back. So it's always best, I feel, to do things in communication and text where you can provide the information that is needed. And even if it's too much information, it can be filtered. Because once you kind of overtalk, which you can do if you're nervous, you need to repeat yourself, which is a infuriating thing as well. The social rules, still oblivious to them. And the appointment window, the gas, the guy does the gas, checks the gas every year, does that. And certain other appointments, it's like between 8 and 1 and 2 to 5. And although I appreciate that sort of approach, it's also infuriating because you feel you're sitting waiting from that time to the next, waiting for that to happen. And sometimes it doesn't happen until near the end of that time frame, and it's quite a good number of hours you're not able to relax. But it is methods that make things a little bit better than they have been for people.
I sometimes wonder if autistic...
I actually used...
Go on.
Go on.
Well, I wonder if I can remember what I was going to say now. No, I was wondering about unwritten social rules and whether autistic people have their own unwritten social rules, because sometimes when I'm talking to my autistic friend, we're almost telepathic. We kind of recognise each other's pattern recognition. It's like the connections we make, you know, and it's kind of like unspoken. So I just thought I'd reflect on that.
I actually used to, I would go from one end of the building to the other to go and speak to someone. rather than use the phone. And then I came up with this sort of semi-clever thing that it was.
You're cutting off a bit, Gia.
I'm trying to remember what the solution was to that. Is it like too much power being demanded on his the device he's using? Something needs switched off in the background.
And just to remind ourselves as well, it's just been said in the comments, there's an expectation that text is what everybody uses as a communication in some way. If it's not the way they do it, the first choice, it's something that they have. Like, for instance, like a company wanting to text you about something, but you don't use phones, you don't use that. And if you don't do that, they make it more awkward for you because they treat you like you're being the awkward one, but you're not being awkward. You're just using things to what suits you.
Yeah, also in the comments, I used to have problems pre-diagnosis when I went to the job centre saying I really don't like using telephones. And they said, well, you're not going to get a job unless you use a telephone. It was, that was their attitude pre-diagnosis.
Yeah, that's going back to that thing where, you're not trying hard enough. You're not trying. You don't want to use the phone? Who likes to use the phone? It's part of life. Use the phone. Stop being awkward, etc. Not taking that sort of kind of thing seriously, because using the phone is horrible, I feel. And I don't do it very often, but I do when needed. And sometimes even doing it, to contact like a friend, or sometimes I feel that's even a hell of an effort. Never mind contacting things regarding jobs or things official, because a lot of these things now, they were before, but they're more so, there's automated, you need to press this button and that button, and they make you hang around until you're in a queue. I mean, they do everything that winds you up. And not just wind you up in terms of, this is a nuisance. It's like, it causes anxiety.
I can sometimes be on the phone for hours, especially if it's somebody who's like a fellow weirdo, and we sort of get into a zone where we're just rapping, and we always say like, oh, after 5 minutes, like, just not let this be a long one, eh? Just keep it short, and then we get cut off, and the phones have a cut-off point at 2 hours. I mean, it can get very sore holding a phone that long if you've not got a stand. But I just thought I'd put that one in there.
Yeah, I listen to this show. I'm using the phone right now because the laptop just simply doesn't cope with it. And when you put these things on the screen, I've got a magnifying glass I use so I can read it.
The next post is from Autism Oxford UK, Mental Health Service. And what they're talking about is sensory sensitivities and heat. For many neurodivergent people, hot weather can amplify sensory sensitivities. Scratchy clothes feel even more uncomfortable. Noise feels louder. Sleep can be disrupted. Energy levels dip. And sometimes it's just too much. Here are some things that might help. Loose, breathable clothing. Ditch the seams if you can. Cool clothes on your neck or wrists. blackout blinds or sunglasses to reduce glare, cold water play or sensory play with ice, perfect for kids, frozen grapes or ice poles for sensory input, lower your expectations. It's okay to slow down and do less. Prioritise your needs and take breaks when you need to. You're not imagining it. Heat is harder for some people. Take breaks, find shade, say no, do what works for you. What's your thoughts? You enjoying the weather?
Friday kind of knocked me out. Friday evening, I was just in my bed by about 8 o'clock. I was absolutely shattered. And I'd done all that stuff about, keeping the windows closed so the house wouldn't get as hot as outside. I mean, it only got to 25, but when I did go out in it, it was rather pleasant, to just be out in it briefly. And because of an elderly dog, I've got to be aware of the effect it's having on her. In fact, just now it looks like it's kind of had an effect on her. So, things like that. So, you just get through what you need to get through and look after yourself.
It hasn't bothered me this time, and I'm a bit concerned in case I'm not registering the heat. So I feel warm, but I don't feel at all hot. I don't feel sweaty, so I just hope that my ability to understand my body temperature isn't going.
I can understand that concern because I do recall that we've had a few discussions on sensitivities and pain and how many people who are autistic relate to that. And some people don't recognise, that sensation. Some people don't recognise that sort of feeling. And it sometimes worries people that they don't do that, whether it's a genuine worry or not. I do get that, absolutely.
I worked outdoors, well, at one point, 12 years in a stretch, and it was a lot colder then. It was, I remember it was -7 one day when I started work. And I just got, in the winter, you were cold, and in the summer, you were hot. And when it rained, you got wet, and that was just it, really.
I mean, my experience with the heat this year, or even just recently, is I'm grateful that I have a fan. Generally, I use the fan, it's a standing fan. I generally use it, for the bedroom, to help me sleep. But I'm using it more and more to stand next to me while I'm sitting in the living room. And it's it feels such a relief that I've got that. It's got all those different settings and stuff. It's, the things that you're grateful for, and that just shows you how warm it's been. I generally keep the windows closed in my house when I'm in. I'll open them when I'm out so to let air in and all that, but when I'm in, it's because where I live is, a lot of people live about and it's quite busy, and if it's nice weather, a lot of people will be about and doing things, so it can get quite noisy, so I close the window. So it's handy to have that sort of thing in place. And the comment saying, I struggle with both heat and cold. Such is life. I can identify that a lot. There's many times I've sat in my living room going like, I'm cold. I need to put the heating on. Which sounds kind of a weird thing to say right now because I'm actually boiling. And then not that long after it, it's like, oh, I'm roasting. and I'm opening the windows and putting the fan on to cool myself down. It's so infuriating. You know, never seem happy. There never seems to be a happy medium.
The other thing is air conditioning, like the local cinema. When I go in the summer, I take a coat with me because it is just like watching a film sat in a fridge.
Yeah, a lot of the public places like that, I suppose they probably find it difficult to accommodate everybody. So they just do it at a certain kind of temperature and kind of hope that they can please most people. But of course that would affect. I mean, I can totally believe it. I mean, I've been in some places where there has been air conditioning and the place is freezing, but outside it's absolutely boiling. So you'll feel strange as well doing that because it's like one extreme to another. It's odd.
To be fair, even in the winter, if you go, you keep your jacket on. It might be a bit warm. It's like they turn the heating off during the day, and in the summer they just make sure that the air conditioning's going full blast. I hate it.
The thing about heat is talked about as a good thing, and it is. But more so that, see, when you get the weather that we've had, sunny weather, it's like, this is a fantastic thing. Appreciate it while it's here. Myself, being bald and fair-skinned, I'm not a great fan of the sun, and it can be very uncomfortable being out and about it. So sometimes I look to cover myself up. Then people think you're strange for doing that because why are you wearing that? It's roasting. It's like, well, I'm basically protecting my arms from being burned. And when you get burned, it's sometimes it catches you by surprise. You don't feel you're getting burned until later on. You kind of notice it later on. It begins to kind of sting a little. So it's that sort of thing. Is the kind of happy medium never seems to be there, but at least you sort of know what to do in certain ways to protect yourself and to make yourself most comfortable.
I posted once. It was the summer, and I said I was opening some jars and catching the hot air in the jars, and then keeping them so that in the winter I could open the jars and I'd have hot air in the house. But when I opened the jars in the winter, the air had gone cold, and I realised that the hot air had gone off. So next summer, I said I'm going to trap the hot air in the jars and then put the jars in the fridge to keep the hot air fresh. And I felt terrible because someone said, "Oh, what a beautiful story! You must have been lovely as a child to come up and do something as wonderful as that." And I had to say, "No, no, no, it's just a joke."
Sometimes you can just be so funny that people miss the point of the joke. You can be too convincing sometimes. I totally get that.
I was taking that very seriously. I thought that was just brilliant, as a concept.
In fairness, I was almost
And
caught out. But then we started talking about the fridge, I'm going, oh, wait a minute. So you nearly got me as well, Gia.
I
You never know till you've
yeah,
tried.
don't forget, make sure you put the hot air in the fridge to keep it fresh for the winter.
What's that survival technique where you're meant to put a blanket over yourself and light a candle? Don't try this at home, kids.
Well, that's a good one. So thanks everybody. It was a great conversation tonight. It was quite intense, but quite funny as well, especially at the end. You know, some jokes, which is great. So thanks everybody for taking part, and thanks for everyone who shared the post that we discussed tonight. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 22nd of June 2025, which is part of the 5:55 to 7:30 p.m. at UK time Autistic Radio Spectrum Voices Conversation, which is on Facebook Live and YouTube, LinkedIn, and other platforms. So thank you again, and now I'll hand over to Jules.
Thank you, Harry. Yes, at this time we discuss some of the things that we're doing here at Autistic Radio. It's a reminder, really, that we're here every Sunday for a drop-in at 4:44 p.m. UK time to have an off-the-cuff general discussion about autism, and you can just join that by following any of the links. And then every Sunday there's also a 555 Facebook discussion where Harry takes interesting articles and we put our own thoughts, which hopefully will explain to some people some of the similarities of their own autism and the autism that we find here.